The Secrets of Star Wars is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
Hi, this is Vanessa Marshall. I play Harrison Dula on Star Wars Rebels, and you're listening to the Secrets of Star Wars podcast. May the Force be with you always.
You're listening to the Secrets of Star Wars, episode 178.
Hello there.
It's a power that Jedi have that lets them control people and make things float.
Impressive. Every word in that sentence was wrong.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
It's against my programming to impersonate a deity.
That's not how the Force works.
Force is with me, and I am with the Force, and I fear nothing.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.
Hello there, everyone. I'm Mike Creavey, aka Old Ben. I'm older than ever, I guess, each time I say that. And you're listening right now to The Secrets of Star Wars, where we talk about everything connected to that galaxy far, far away, including the deeper themes and meanings. Please be sure to share this podcast on Facebook, or the X formerly known as Twitter, as I keep calling it, and let us know how we're doing by leaving us a review over there. On this episode of Secrets of Star Wars, we are exploring the more mystical side, let's say, of our beloved franchise, the so-called Mortis gods or Mortis entities from the Clone Wars series and also from Rebels. And it seems that they are, while they've been one of the galaxy far, far away's biggest mysteries, it seems like they're evidently going to be even more significant than we realized before because of a brief little reference to them that may have deeper implications in the most recent Ahsoka series. So joining me to explore this intriguingly bizarre mystery of the Mortis entities is an all-star panel including Kathryn Laffrey. Kathryn, welcome. How are you?
Hello, good. Good.
And we also have Thomas Salerno with us. Thomas, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Mike. Glad to be here.
It's exciting, and I as we were saying beforehand, I just was planning on starting out by just saying, What are we talking about here tonight? Like, and the more I dug into this, and I think, you guys had indicated probably some similar experiences. There's so many rabbit holes here. And especially if you go through YouTube and do deep dives on everything from just, I don't know, Google searches to Reddit to whatever. I mean, there's no shortage of speculation and theories and all kinds of stuff. So we're going to explore some of that tonight. But what I want to do is just kind of set the stage here. I'm going to read from my phone here because it's easier to get. And on Wikipedia, just for those of you who need a quick little recap, this was a good summary, I thought. It says here, so the Mortis entities, Mortis is this location that we encounter here, but here's the description of it. Mortis was an ethereal realm within the Force, which was whispered over in legends and stories passed down through the millennia by Jedi, Sith, and the average spacer alike. It was believed to have existed outside any star system and potentially the galaxy or even the universe. Some believed that the origins of the Force came from Mortis. So, if you're going to summarize it, I figure that's a pretty decent summary perhaps, but we are dealing here with this place, if you even want to call it that, and these entities which originated in the Clone Wars back in 2011 in a three episode arc, Overlords, Altar of Mortis, and Ghosts of Mortis. Again, that was the third season of the Clone Wars, later mentioned in Star Wars Rebels episodes Wolves and the Door and A World Between Worlds. And so that's kind of our framework here episodically for the most, I guess, the canon stuff. And then we'll talk about Ahsoka a little later. But I wanted to start off by asking you guys, what did you think when you first encountered this particular story arc? Maybe, when it was, any context that just might, set up the listener here for kind of how you entered into this sort of consideration. Kathryn, let's maybe start with you.
Well, it follows right after the Night Sisters. And so it kind of just, it throws you off. You're like going, wait a minute, what's going on in the Clone Wars? What's happening out in the greater galaxy? And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, we're in this strange world. If it's a world, wherever it may be, we don't know. And just, it just seemed like this huge break in the story. and yet had all kinds of stuff that made you go, wait, what's going on? Who controls the Force? Who are these things, people, whatever they are? So yeah, it added tons of questions and just made you wonder more about what is going on.
Sure. Yeah, Thomas, was it similar for you, or what was your first reaction?
Well, I've got to admit that when in the early seasons of Clone Wars, I was kind of at a nadir of my enjoyment of Star Wars, and I was not watching Clone Wars religiously, but I just happened to catch these episodes when they were on. And I hated them. I didn't like them at all. I was like, no, it's midi-chlorians again. George Lucas, you're making things too complicated. I was like, Force gods, what? I wasn't having any of it initially. Yeah. But that changed later, which I will probably get into in your next question for us. But yeah, initially I think this was when I checked out of Clone Wars. It just, I'm like, this is too much. They're changing too much stuff. The Force is just an energy field that permeates all living things. Why couldn't they just keep it at that? It's like, and I think this was the point when I stopped watching Clone Wars for a while. Got back into it later. I've seen most of it now, obviously, but yeah, initially I wasn't having any of this.
That was kind of my feel too, because I was going back and looking at dates and trying to figure things out. So because I think this was on Disney XD, right? Originally, was that right?
I thought it was on Cartoon Network for the first few seasons.
For some of it, yeah. Because 2011, I was a fairly new youth director, and I was pretty busy with that, and and I didn't really have any access to really either of those. And it was certainly before Disney Plus and the whole Disney buyout of Lucasfilm, and it wasn't until probably 7 years later. And when my daughter was, our eldest daughter, Noelle, was a couple years, she was like 3 maybe. And so I was starting to introduce her to Star Wars a little bit. And it was on Netflix. I remember they had, for a while there, I think, they had somehow got the rights for it. So Netflix had Clone Wars on, and I was like, well, I'll watch this. And it was before any of the new movies were coming out, so but yeah, it was weird for me too. Like, the whole series was weird because I wasn't used to it. I'd heard of it for years, and I was like, I don't know, animation, this is kind of goofy. But I really started falling in love with it, and then I hit this, and I was not particularly impressed or even interested even or convinced by it. And so, I was sort of, skeptical, or just like, what? Okay. And honestly, to bring it around now, and I'll kick it off here. My opinion changed quite a bit on this arc, and I have a lot of questions, but, and I don't know, maybe we can get into this too later. The speculation, I want to speculate all the time on Star Wars, but I've been disappointed so many times because I think by even if what it ended up being was arguably better objectively than what I had come up with, the whole fan fiction thing, I wonder if it's just like when you practice building something up in your mind the way you want it to be, or you think it will be, just the disappointment of it being different than what you thought. In life in general, probably, like in our faith, I think that can happen. So maybe that's an effect as well. But I'm turn it over to you guys. Yeah.
As a writer myself, I start to come up with these plot lines, and when the writers of the show decide to go in a different direction, I'll admit it disappoints me. I'm like, that's not how I would have written it. It's like, it's like a professional almost disappointment there.
Right.
Yeah.
How about you, Kathryn? Did you? So you sounded like you were pretty interested in it more from the get go, but has that deepened or?
Well, I don't think I watched it right away.
Okay.
Because I kind of came into it later. I had a friend of mine say, "Hey, you really got to watch this. It's really good." So I started watching everything just in bulk, like a couple shows at a time. And then the thing that was really interesting for me was today I actually found an interview with Dave Filoni. And he talked about how even George's idea concept, when he pitched it to him, he was like, "Really, George? This is what we want to do?" And it was just funny to hear him say that. And he was like, "Okay, we'll do this. You want a creature that turns into a griffin? Or, okay, we'll do this. So it was out there, I think, for everybody.
I could just see him there, just, like, like, George, can you imagine getting to that point? We've all seen these interviews with Dave Filoni about like his story and his journey, like to Lucasfilm and just being this ultimate fanboy. But good for him, right? Again, for like embracing like the profession, like this is what I'm doing. I'm going to do it well. And like even getting to the point after a few years of being able to be there, like, what do you, George? I don't know. Can you, let's explain this a little more. And that's, is that the one, Kathryn, where he said, I had some notes on that, like, if I got this right, because I don't have the writers in front of me here for this, but this was, when Lucas, this was before Lucas had sold Lucasfilm. So I think he's on the credits as an executive producer, if I'm not mistaken, for a lot of Clone Wars, or maybe even for most of those seasons, I think.
I'm not sure.
I'll look it up later.
Look.
So he wasn't like, this was this advisory role, where maybe you can see some of the seeds maybe being planted of, the next wave of like, it being completely in somebody else's hands, with him as sort of the inspiration for it. But, so he wasn't maybe, I guess, writing this directly or these episodes, but this is interesting, though, knowing that it is a concept from him, which is very different than a lot of stuff we see today that we might be like, well, that's not from George. This is. So
this, yeah. Makes you wonder, is George see himself as the father?
Oh, I wonder.
You know what? My opinion really only started to change fairly recently. Okay. I got more comfortable with it. Interesting, like, I think the seed of my sort of turnaround was planted by there's a fan artist named Jake Bartok. I don't know if you've seen him on social media and stuff, but he does just this really awesome Star Wars art. And one of the great pieces that I have a few of his pieces actually, but the one that I really want is this kind of Star Wars Lord of the Rings mashup. And in that piece, he drew the wizards as Mortis gods.
Nice.
And and that got me thinking, like, yeah, maybe that's kind of what the Mortis gods are in a Star Wars context. They're like the Maiar almost, and that started to get me thinking, like, a little bit more of a positive spin on this idea. And when Ahsoka came around and we started to see those little seeds planted throughout the show of like referring obliquely to the Mortis gods, the mystery of it pulled me in. I was like, we may be actually starting to get some answers here. And I think that mystery is what hooked me, not so much the concept itself of the Mortis gods, but the unanswered questions. And I actually hope they don't answer every question. I want there to be some mystery surrounding these figures going forward, because I don't think we need, when George starts to over-explain stuff, you get midi-chlorians. And so, it's like, I want some questions unanswered. But yeah, I've turned around on these characters, and I'm interested to see where they take it from here. And in rewatching the arc, I enjoyed it a million times more than the first time I saw it when I hated it.
Well, and I just got the image you were talking about here. It was pretty easy to find, but I can see if I can give Dom the link to that. We can maybe put it in the show notes or something. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, like Gandalf has Morai on his shoulder. It's awesome.
Oh my gosh. And Elrond and Arwen are Chiss, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah,
it's pretty awesome. Well, yeah. Why don't we just to kind of recap a tad, just because this isn't so much a breakdown. Well, I guess it is and it isn't a breakdown of the Mortis arc episode. So I don't have the full descriptions of those episodes because that would take a little while. But this, just to recap, we have this distress signal goes out that hasn't been used in like thousands of years. This Jedi distress signal. And Anakin and Obi-Wan and Ahsoka show up, and the thing they end up going into that becomes Mortis, I don't know if you guys thought this, but the first thing I thought was it just looks like a giant holocron.
Yeah, when my brother and I were watching it yesterday, that's what we said. Like, yeah,
and it's just that opens up and they go in, and there's no landing or anything, just appear in this ethereal realm, as the description is. And let me ask you guys this: like, did you, after watching it a few times now, what's your opinion about where this is in terms of like a spatial place versus, you know, are they another Lord of the Rings thing? I just thought of this tonight. It reminded me of when I think it's when they go to Lothlorien and Sam says, you know, that it's like being in a song.
Outside of time,
Yeah, and which is brilliant, of course, because Tolkien, the word master, like that's what the word enchantment means. But he doesn't use the word enchantment. He says it's like being in a song.
Inside
you know?
a song.
I'm wondering about that. Like, you know, is this like inside the Force? Like, are we in it? Is this there's so many different takes on it, but that's my kind of feel, or it's something like that. You know, this trans-dimensional, I don't know, or a fulcrum. I think I saw somewhere, or a what do I call a conduit of the Force? I think it was described somewhere else.
Yeah, they use that word in the episode.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Conduit. Yeah.
It was compared to like Dagobah or even Octu because of that in some ways.
Yeah.
But way trippier.
Well, it's fascinating because in the opening, when you have them going off on their shuttle and they're supposed to rendezvous with this big Star Destroyer, and they're trying to talk to each other over broken communications. And they're like, no, we're at the coordinates. No, we're at the coordinates. Where are you?
Right.
So it's like, you know, right then and there's been a little like space-time slip happen somewhere.
Yeah.
Or a Stargate or I don't know.
The upside down. I don't know. I've never made a Stranger Things reference but on here, but who knows? Yeah. They're on the other side of it. Yeah, that's I will say it's funny because I have to throw this in from a Catholic perspective, since this is a Catholic show, and I can't help but just, you know, think of some of the depictions when the daughter the first time the daughter appeared. One of my first thoughts was like, what is she wearing? Like, like I'm so, you know, and it's like, oh no, like this is gonna show up on DeviantArt, and like it's gonna be like, okay, so, you know, just for, you know, parental reasons, let's just say for all listeners that have young children, the outfit of the daughter is not the most modest Star Wars outfit, probably not the least one either, but anyway, so that was kind of bizarre.
In my imagination, I think of it like the costumes you see on Olympic ice skaters.
Oh yeah,
where it looks like they're not wearing anything, but they have that flesh-colored panel.
Yes, that could be. Yeah,
I figure she's got a little sheer panel keeping all that together, because otherwise, that's not a comfortable outfit. No.
Gosh. Which, well, but then that might be an odd, you know, sort of roundabout way of jumping into a profound question here about these entities. What even are they? You know, because we definitely get the sense that they're not, strictly speaking, corporeal beings. They're not really,
and yet they can be
men
killed.
or women, but they can be killed.
Right.
Yeah, but with like a magic thing.
Right.
You know, so because the lightsabers have no effect, which that's one of the coolest things to me about it is when Anakin's got the lightsaber up and the father just grabs it, like, would you just get that out of my face? And like, and this was even like early on before they got really, really good with the animation and like the facial features. But I love the look on his face because Anakin's face is ours, you know, like, no, like that's not how lightsabers work.
Yeah.
So, but how did you guys see this as far as like what they are? Because there was a neat thing Dave said here based on some speculation people had.
I wonder if they're beings that have sort of left their corporeal existence, almost like the ancients in Star Trek, not Star Trek, Stargate. Almost like the ancients, you know, where they've kind of left there because like they still seem to have some people in the physical world remember them. Like this is jumping ahead a little bit, but at the end of Ahsoka, we see statues of them.
Right.
So like, and they're on the Jedi Temple. Right. And then they're on the Jedi Temple and on Lothal. And so I'm like, so they clearly are able to manifest in the physical world. They're not simply, I almost wonder if they have not left their corporeal existence behind, but have kind of been assumed bodily into the Force, almost like the Virgin Mary is like assumed, you know, body. It's like, because if they can still manifest physically and interact with people, or they could be like angels who have no bodies naturally, and when they have to interact with people, they take on a temporary body.
Right.
You know,
that sounds the closest to what the father was trying to explain to Anakin.
Okay.
Because he said that.
Oh, how did he put that? I forget.
he said that we had to withdraw ourselves from the material world.
Oh,
and then
right.
he says we're now anchorites of the Force. And so we placed
Right.
ourselves in this monastery.
Yeah.
Like a prison, sure, a prison and a sanctuary at the same time, he said. But yeah, that was interesting, though, that they like left the material world. So they're not really in the material world. He also said that they take on forms for whoever they're talking to. So that does sound a lot like you were saying, get associated with an angel.
Well, like the Maiar from Lord of the Rings.
That's what I was going to say. There's another,
You know, like the wizards don't have to look like old men, but they choose to.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're way older than old men.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. Wow. Well, and it's neat too, because there's a couple examples we see where I guess it's the son, right? I think he who appears, or the father speculates that it was the son who appeared as Anakin's mother, and I think that's confirmed then, later, to try to. It's interesting to try to. He seems to be trying to get him to leave Padme, or embrace this. This mission that he's got. And I'm curious if, I mean, again, we're jumping all over, but there's been a lot of speculation that Balin at the end of Ahsoka might be, called to sort of take up the son's path, or some have speculated the father, and there's different speculation on that, with Ahsoka seeming to have this kind of carrying on of the mission, or the presence, or the sort of ambiance, whatever you want to say, of the daughter. A lot of people saying Anakin as the father. I know there's a lot of debate about that. But I don't really, it's interesting. I don't know how that connects yet. So I don't feel comfortable.
Yeah, there's a lot of unanswered questions.
But there's so many visual connections through all of this that it blows my mind. You catch on to one thing, and the symbol of the daughter and the son overlapped, where it looks like a Sith symbol with almost a 4-petal flower behind it.
Oh, yeah.
And that's been placed in all different episodes wherever they reference the world between worlds, or Jedi going through a trial. And I had not caught this before today, and I was watching a couple videos and someone pointed them out. When Ahsoka takes the younglings to go make their lightsabers, the entrance to that temple has that symbol. And then it's within that temple. And this is where they're getting their lightsabers. They're going through their personal trials. And then also when Ezra and Kanan, and later Ahsoka goes with them, the temple on Lothal, the platform that they stand on outside the temple to open it, also is that symbol. So now we're getting all these little points that all come back to the Mortis gods and Ahsoka and Ezra, and everything's starting to oh my gosh, there's a little chain that's connecting all this together.
I know it was there had been speculation. I was wondering about this myself, and then Dave kind of shot it down. I heard in an interview from years ago, kind of in the initial speculation about the Mortis gods, because he said, there were a lot of people speculating. Are the son and the daughter, manifestations of the father's darkness and the father's light and all this? And
I've heard that one. Yeah.
And Dave just said, he said pretty clearly that the son and the daughter are beings, that they're not just projections of the father. That was, without giving too much, really specific detail in the interview I heard with him, he was just at least confirming that we are dealing with 3 distinct entities here that are not just, manifestations of different, aspects of one single thing.
It's not modalism then.
Right. Yeah. By the way, there's a hilarious video. If any of you have seen it, I found it around St. Patrick's Day the one year, but it's a really kind of cheap quality but hilarious little animation with Patrick, using the shamrock to explain.
Oh, that's modalism, Patrick.
And I think it was I think it was a Lutheran group that put it out, but it's like, no, that's modalism, Patrick. No, and everything, he's like, oh, let's try this one. He's like, oh, that's Pelagian. It's like everything he tries, they're incredibly sophisticated, like calling it out. So, but yeah, I mean, like Star Wars, we get into these, these potential galactic wide implications that can come from some of these things, So, with kind of that in mind, I wanted to ask you guys, where do you see some possible crossovers here, or other things we've seen in Star Wars films or TV shows, even if it's not a direct reference to Mortis, that you suspect could be kind of connected? I mean, I mentioned Dagobah's one I mentioned that came up somewhere else, where they talked about this idea of these tests kind of by the Force that seem to happen in other places, even if you don't see the Mortis entity specifically involved. But is that something else that, like, you've seen similar, in other places that came to mind, like a rift in the Force, or these destiny testing kind of things, which opens up
like
a whole
anytime
other...
they step out of time and space and have these little moments. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can almost think of Rey fighting with herself as being one of these.
That's true.
Moments. Yeah.
Yeah. On the Death Star, I guess, right? That, the wreckage.
Yeah. On the wreckage. Yep.
Oh, right. Or when she sees all those copies of her, so that weird place in, on Octo.
Yeah.
I was like, what's going on? And then that reminds me, I just realized this, thinking of The Last Jedi, in Luke's, or the temple that Luke finds on Octo, there's kind of a very similar sort of Taoist kind of light and dark symbol.
Yeah.
That it's not exactly the same, but it's similar to the one in the big courtyard on Mortis.
Yeah.
It was very similar. Yeah.
I know there was a lot of speculation when Last Jedi came out to speak. Well, don't worry, I won't go down that rabbit hole. But but just dancing around the top of it a little bit, maybe kicking a stone or two down the well. But that reminds me that there was a lot of speculation at the time when some of the images started coming out ahead of the release of the fact that, if you kind of lined up that weird figure with Snoke, they were tremendously similar. If you imagine him in the shadows or something, and there was all this speculation, it's going to turn out that Snoke is the prime Jedi, and he's fallen, and he's and I was like, again, one of the many things I think would have been much cooler than nope, he was just a science experiment. Like, okay, but anyway, no, that's actually a good point. I wonder if the aesthetic there was on purpose, to kind of maybe tie in these broader things.
And Octo is like supposed to be that's the primal Jedi planet. So I wonder if like the early Jedi had more of a connection to these entities. If Disney makes that sort of Dawn of the Jedi movie, we may get some answers about that there.
And there was one fan theory that said that the Mortis entities were the ones that sort of seeded out the quest for finding Force users. And that's why you would see this symbolism with the Jedi temples. It's a way of drawing them in to test them in the world between worlds, and then to see whether or not they're worthy to be Force wielders, to be Jedi. So it was kind of interesting, especially knowing that, you have the daughter and the son, you've got the light and the dark side. And when they go through these tests, a lot of times they're dealing with the light and the dark side within themselves. So which way are they going to fall, to keep the balance, so to speak?
Well, I wonder too, like C.S. Lewis in one of my favorite things he wrote in the Ransom trilogy, when he's talking about, especially for anyone that's interested in theology of the body, if you want a great primer on theology of the body, read Paralandra, which was written decades before John Paul II wrote a word about it, and it's fascinating because a lot of the vision is similar, because Lewis, without getting into too much detail, Lewis in this sort of exploration of the notion of kind of the cosmic drama, of the angels and demons and masculinity and femininity really play into that quite a bit, especially when he's trying to describe, basically his experience of meeting Mars and Venus.
Oh, the Eldil. Yeah.
Right. And so, and the way Lewis describes masculinity and femininity and gender as, so much more than what most of any of the conversation we hear kind of in the popular world has to do with. Don't worry, I'm going to land the plane here. He says in there something that I wonder if that could apply here, where, almost like Jedi and Sith, or even some of these other, kind of like dark side movements, whatever Balin is, because he's not quite Sith or whatever. You get the impression that it's like those are like kind of local applications or manifestations within the physical realm of some much incredible cosmic reality that goes all the way up, rather than us projecting it up and out, and that's Lewis's point. He's like, masculinity and femininity are not us putting that onto things like the sun and the mountains and the sea. They have participation in this thing that we do through our physical, sort of manifestation. So that just an interesting speculation. I wonder if this is almost something similar where, the daughter represents all that the light side really kind of is, in a sense, and all the virtues and the hope and all that kind of stuff. And the Jedi at their best are a little bit like her, something like that. And then the Sith, because I forget, the son says something where they're like, "Oh, you're Sith," when they first meet him.
He says no and yes.
Right. And he's just, and he's kind of coy about it, but that whatever he's talking about, like, he's much bigger than just that. Like, he's dark side is bigger than just Sith, something like that. Because
the Sith have a specific dogma. They have a specific ideology that's different from other dark force users. A guy's a Sith as soon as he starts talking, because they will start parroting Sith ideology to you.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about Balin. He doesn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
He does not parrot. Because at first I'm like, oh, he dresses just like one. But once he opened his mouth, I'm like, okay, this guy's different.
Yeah.
He's not giving the usual spiel that a Sith does.
Nor does Kylo.
Nor does Kylo really. Yeah. And so I like this idea of kind of expanding the Star Wars universe beyond the Jedi and the Sith to show us other light side and dark side factions. And they've been doing that before. We have the Guardians of the Whills, our light side faction, but they're not Jedi, so I'm interested to see where they go with this, because I believe it has the potential to expand the universe beyond what we're used to, which is good.
Oh, and also Secrets of Star Wars' own Angela as the Bendu. It reminds me of the Rebels Bendu, character too. Yeah, yeah. Which, that's an interesting question, because everything connects to the Mortis god. So why not?
Does he fit?
Is the Bendu some kind of father connection? Because he's, the father's sort of in between the son and the daughter. Which
that's weird, because as much as Star Wars likes to try and be quasi-Taoist, where it's like, light and darkness need one another and stuff. Right. The father talks at several points as if good is good and evil is evil.
Yeah, he doesn't warn the daughter that she's too good and she's got to reel it back a little bit.
Right. It's always that what the son is doing is evil. And he says, I'm like, okay, so the dark side is objectively bad. It's not just misunderstood here.
Which only a Sith deals in absolutes, so...
But it's just weird. It's like...
It's the philosophical problem.
Right. That's the way... I feel like when Star Wars delves too deep into that, it becomes a bit incoherent.
Yeah,
in terms of its theology of good and evil, but...
There was one audio thing about the father that I really picked up on watching it again today. And especially knowing that this follows right after the Night Sisters arc, where we have Mother Talzin's dual voice with that odd echo. The father has the same voice. He has this weird, echoey dual voice that makes you just a little weary of him. It's like, okay, he's, almost that double talk. You kind of start feeling a little uneasy around him about what's his true goal here. He's walking the light side, dark side bridge a little too much.
Well, I wonder, Thomas, you mentioned earlier about, and I couldn't agree more, the not wanting them to necessarily, reveal too much or over reveal too much, try to keep some mystery to this. But like with the Ahsoka arc and with Baylan, how did you feel about I'll ask you both this, but how did you feel about what ostensibly now seems to be some kind of Mortis connection that was calling to him? Yeah. But super vague. Because he's just completely, like there's nothing. I've had a vision, like nothing at all. It's just like, if the stories are like, is he talking about?
Well, he says he wants to break the cycle of good and evil fighting one another, because he talks about, how the Jedi and the Sith, as represented, by the Republic and the Empire, are always cycling back and forth. And I mean, and even like, it's almost like they're responding to the sequel trilogy, which had to do the Empire and the Rebellion again, and he brings up this point that history is cyclical. I just finished writing a piece about one of my favorite novels of all time, A Canticle for Leibowitz, which has this same and that was written by a Catholic science fiction writer, but this same theme where like there's civilization destroys itself in a huge war, and then it builds it back up and it falls again. And Baylan kind of he says explicitly he wants to break that cycle. And I think he believes that somehow the Mortis entities have some power to do this. I don't know what, like you said, super vague, but I think it has to tie into that somehow. His want to control history or have some kind of power to end the constant struggle between the light and the dark.
Well, our wonderful Imperial art critic who spoke with Sabine, trying to figure out what that Mortis god icon was telling him, said it really clearly. Whoever controls the portal to the world between worlds controls the universe. And if that's what Baylan wants to do, to control the universe, to break the cycle, he's heading for the world between worlds. And everything points to the Mortis gods having a direct connection to that. And it's interesting because in rewatching the bits of Rebels that talk about all of this, and I rewatched when they went into the temple and you see Yoda appear, and I'm like, wait a minute, in Rebels, Yoda's alive on Dagobah. So how in the world is he there? Of course, he uses the great line, is I'm here because you're here. Okay, great.
Thanks, Yoda.
Which, that was helpful, but it was also used by Qui-Gon when he was in Mortis. I'm here because you're here.
You're here.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, sorry, no, go ahead.
No, so it's interesting because it was like, I was trying to wrap my head around is, wait a minute, is Yoda bilocating? Is he like a Star Wars Padre Pio? What's going on here? But then it's like, no, Yoda knew how to access the world between worlds. Ooh. I think he figured it out. And so there's just cool. that every time they're in the temple, you have those portals available to them. And so that's
it's
a
like
little
a nexus.
bit of like,
Yeah. Very
that's
interesting.
Cool. Which is, it has to make Palpatine even more upset that he can't crack it,
Well, he
did
sort
you
of
notice
does,
he was using
right?
he was using witchcraft.
Witchcraft,
he was like
but like
full
he
on,
was
like cauldron and
it was like almost like the Dathomir witches, except the fire was blue instead of green.
Yeah, and he was like trying to get in.
But he's going on his full-on Sauron the Necromancer at that point. I was like, yeah.
I was laughing though when you mentioned about Qui-Gon, Kathryn. The reason I chuckled was because in one of those interviews I listened to with Dave, they were pressing him. It was early on. I think it was a Rebel Force radio thing when it first came out. It was like a playback one, and they were like going nuts trying to figure it out. And they said, was it really Qui-Gon? Was it his Force ghost? And that was a big, I think, controversial thing at the time, which I think has kind of died down because of the timeline.
Yeah.
Of Obi-Wan meeting Qui-Gon's ghost, but then being shocked, at the end of episode 3 later
Nick, my brother and I talked about this when we watched it yesterday. We were like, wait a minute.
and then on top of it now with canon, saying that it's 10 more years before he actually makes that kind of contact with him at the end of the Obi-Wan series. Which I love that scene, by the way. Took you long enough. But so Dave didn't really directly address it, but what he said was, they said, "Was that really Qui-Gon?" And he's like, "Well," and he's kind of like being sheepish. He's like, "Oh, it was Qui-Gon's real voice. I can tell you that." He's like, all he's
from
doing
a certain point of view, I guess.
He's confirming it was Liam Neeson.
Was it really? I wondered about that.
It was.
And the same actress who did Shmi did the voice of Anakin's mother.
Oh, that's cool.
But it wasn't really her.
Yeah, but he said, but was it Qui-Gon? Like, I don't know.
I'm going to have to pull a Jimmy Akin one on this one. It's always demons.
It's always right.
It's like when they say like demons can, kind of manifest themselves as a departed loved one and try to mess with you. And it's like, that's exactly what happened there. Oh, Anakin's long lost mother, and there she is, and trying to twist his thinking.
I think it's also makes me wonder, like, was it really, it wasn't really Darth Vader in the cave on Dagobah, but Luke learned a lot through that. And what's funny is I still remember being a kid and being like weirded out by the whole, like, even knowing that Vader was his dad, like going back and watching him later, but still a kid. And it's like why is it Luke's head in the helmet? Like, why is it like, and like taking me so long to start to grapple with the, those more like esoteric kind of like, wait, well, it's what he could become, but also it's his dad. So they're kind of one because father and son, so like all these kinds of things. But yeah, I'm still a little torn on that too. Like, it looks like a Force ghost, right? He has that blue hue.
Yeah.
But yeah,
he appears differently than, say, Ahsoka's future self appears, or Shmi,
right?
Neither of them have the
That's
aura.
A good point.
Yeah, and he appears later. He appears to Anakin.
He does
in the same kind of way. Yeah.
I always laugh at like just little dumb things I get a kick out of, because he's way up on the mountain that time, and it's always like, why? Just, I'm right here. Like, why would you? It would have been much funnier.
Anywhere, right?
It would have been much funnier if he's yelling. Like, Anakin, it's like us in our house. Like, we find ourselves yelling. And it's like, no, you come to me and talk to me. I'm not going to yell across my house. Like, it's like, oh my gosh.
Oh, yeah.
Well, actually, Kathryn, let me bring it back, back to the Mortis entities specifically here, because you mentioned about the War Between Worlds being kind of all over this. I forget, I think this might have come up in a previous episode of the Ahsoka show, but remind me if, did you pick up anything in particular on the similarities with like the glyphs and stuff, and that yellow kind of piping almost on some of those monoliths and stuff that looks similar to, the artwork in Rebels, like at the entrance to the World Between Worlds and that kind of stuff? Were those some of the things you were thinking of, those similarities? Okay.
Yeah, they had similarities that happened over and over again anytime that they were getting close to even referencing it. Like before Kanan even took Ezra to the Jedi Temple, he was sitting with a Jedi holocron open, and it had what looked like a star map with a little bit more to it, because it actually had portals and World Between World imagery on it. And so it was, so it was really interesting to see all these overlaps. And then again, Sabine was talking with the art critic and said, this looks like a star map, but different. And, so then when you see the top-down view of the temple on Lothal, you'll see lines drawn in the dirt going out around different rocks, again, looking like the star map with a little something more. So there's always this little bit of overlay. And we saw it all through Ahsoka, and they even added a audio overlay when Kanan first went into like the World Between Worlds within the Jedi Temple to fight the Temple Guard. The Temple Guard said, I wondered when you'd be like, get back here. I forget the exact wording, but it was the exact same thing that Anakin said to Ahsoka. I'd wonder when you'd be here or something like that. So I was like, no way. So there's a lot of like George Lucas's classic "It rhymes."
Yeah,
right.
So there's definitely a little string that's happening through all of this.
I wonder if they're doing all this now because they realized they should have tackled this stuff in the sequels.
And they have the opportunity, you know.
Because I almost feel like that's the next step. You know, Clone Wars is prequel era, and so the foundations for solving this mystery were kind of laid all the way back then. I almost feel like they should have brought it back in some form, but that's getting into a whole other can of worms about how, like,
yeah.
But yeah, I like that they're tackling it now, though.
I wouldn't necessarily assume there would be room for any of this stuff, or this would be the priority in that Acolyte series, because I don't really know what they're doing with that. I mean, I'm intrigued by it, but I would suspect that, and Thomas, I think you mentioned this earlier, one of you mentioned, I'm sorry, it might have been Kathryn, the name's escaping me now. What's the Dawn of the Jedi series?
Oh, yeah, the movie they're going to make.
And I forget who has that one, if that's the James Mangold one.
I think that's James Mangold. Okay.
Yeah, because which, you know, yes, say what you will about Indy 5, including you want to pretend it doesn't exist. I don't know. I enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah.
But one way or the other, you know, just from the standpoint of filmmaking, you know, it was a really well made. You know, the I thought the pacing was good. Like, you know, he really knows what he's doing. So I'm excited just from that technical and kind of vision standpoint to see what he does with something that different in the Star Wars universe. But I think it might be, I don't know, maybe they're setting the stage here for the kind of thing, because I can't think of anything else that would do this within the canon that has potentially the broadest reach across all these times. Because, you know, you could clearly have some kind of Mortis connection if you're going back 20,000 years, or if you're going into, like you said, Thomas, the new phase of them trying to build up some meat on the bones here of this post-Empire time period with the Rey sequel coming out. So yeah, I think maybe they know, hopefully, that they really got to deliver and go deeper with this and always keep it true to the story, but also be able to give themselves something to explore. So I don't know. That's a thought.
Well, here's a weird thought that popped into my head. If Mortis is outside of space and time, and so's the world between worlds, these beings are not gone. They're out there somewhere. It's like they could come back.
And as Luke says, I think this is my third Last Jedi reference for we should keep a tally.
Counter, yeah.
Like, if that might be a fun, if we can figure out a way to do that, if we do one of our May 4th live streams or something some year, have a tally going every time someone makes a Last Jedi.
It's like what they do with Star Trek whenever they say some kind of.
Yes,
and there's been counters for that.
Well, and it would of course be immoral to suggest any kind of like drinking game with it, but which actually there was a funny Catholic thing. I've mentioned this before. Do you guys ever see there was something? I don't know who put it out. If it was like Eye of the Tiber, one of those satire websites years back, had something about a problematic a trend emerging on Catholic campuses of this new drinking game, and it builds it up like really serious, and it says this joke about taking a shot every time Scott Hahn uses the word covenant in one of his books.
Oh gosh.
I was like, I'm sorry, that's funny. That's kind of funny. No, but yeah, I think Kathryn, you bring up a really cool point with this. As Luke said, that was the Last Jedi reference, right? Nobody's ever gone.
Ever really gone.
Ever really gone, yeah.
That's what I said when my brother and I, when we reached the end of the arc, I was like, no one's ever really gone.
Yeah.
I don't think they're really dead,
they just slipped into another dimension somewhere.
Well, and what'll happen though is if they were killed by a magical enchanted sword and they're able to come back, Morgan Elsbeth has to pitch it was Diana Lee Inosanto, is that I think her name, the actress that played Morgan Elsbeth, that she should be able to petition, be like, hey, look, I know Ahsoka totally killed me with my own enchanted sword, but listen, nobody's ever really gone.
Yeah.
I'm loving all these things, these memes showing up with, time after time that people keep just getting stabbed right through the chest with a lightsaber and coming back like there's no problem.
Well, no, but everybody knows that in Star Wars, for you to really be resurrected in Star Wars, you have to fall down a pit, though.
Yes. Yeah. Very,
Darth Maul and Palpatine both fell down a pit and survived. So
I think I said it in the theater in Rise of Skywalker, and he's like, as once I fell, so throws Kylo down the pit. And I'm like, dude, what's wrong with a force choke? You know what I mean? I'm like, like Vader sits on his, I don't even know if he was on this. I forget if he was even on the same ship as Admiral Ozzel, but he doesn't even stand up, just doesn't even raise his hand.
Yeah, he kills somebody over the TV.
He failed me over a Zoom call.
Yeah,
Zoom call.
I was like, so he can do that, but you're his boss who came back from the dead, and you're like, I'm gonna throw you down another pit. Like, okay.
Oh, to pull things back to mythology for a minute before I forget. The father reminds me a lot of Odin. Not just in the way he looks, but also because of the fact that he's trying to control fate. And he admits to them, if I hadn't brought you here, none of this would have happened. Like he's trying to bring them there to prevent something from happening, to prevent the son from going rogue and doing all this stuff, because he needs Anakin to take his place. But he ends up creating the very crisis he tried to avert. And I'm like, that's Odin, who's always trying to stop Ragnarok.
Yeah.
But by doing that, causes it to happen anyway.
Right. Well, and we know that, Filoni was the other, did he wrote all the episodes, didn't he? I think he did. I'm sorry, for Ahsoka. Forgive me.
Oh, for Ahsoka, I think he did. Yeah.
Because that would make sense with, he was, we brought this up before on the Ahsoka show thing of the Balin and the Hot, was it Shin or Hati or whatever, one of her names, one of her two names, that the wolf, I think, the wolf's chasing the sun or the moon. I don't know if you were there for that, Thomas. I forget. Someone had mentioned that online. We looked it up. That it was a skull. It was in Norse mythology. I wasn't familiar. Yep. That skull is a wolf in the Prose Edda that chases the sun.
Oh, okay.
And Hati chases the moon. So that there's no way that's just chance. To have them paired up.
Yeah, that's
So there's some cool stuff. But yeah. Oh wow. There's so many things. And hey, but by the way, and they do that cycle. I was about to close this tab out. The sun and the moon chasing cycle continues until Ragnarok.
Okay.
At which point the wolves catch up and devour the celestial beings. Is the I guess there's so. These writers, if they're worth their salt, I feel like, they're all, influenced, right? Influenced by great literature, influenced by these great archetypes. Jordan Peterson's fame, right now is so interconnected with this, his own method, right, of exploring some of these archetypes, and that's just, I think, really interesting to people. And my feel on this, and I'll throw it back to you guys here because I think it connects. As we see in the gospel too, or in any of the stories in Scripture, this transcendence of themes, that don't have to be made up for them to be mythic, and I know, Thomas, you can appreciate that, I'm sure too, that, I was going over this with my students the other day about the myth in the biblical sense as genre and sort of style of storytelling. And, this constant human connection that we all have with myth, whether we find it in Lord of the Rings or Star Wars or anywhere. What do you like? Do you guys see anything further here in our closing minutes from that kind of bigger picture, maybe mythic, or then even in our own faith sort of connection here, connection with these themes, with these Mortis entities of the Father and the Son, and not the Holy Spirit, but the the daughter. Again, it's not strict Trinitarian theology, but that's one, of course, I noticed it's pretty on the nose. There is a Trinitarian-ish, kind of thing that's pretty clear here, and monastery and anchorites.
Anchorite, yeah.
Right. So anything else like that you guys caught, from a more like a Catholic perspective even?
I mean, the fact that the daughter has Morai, the owl, a representative of like wisdom in the spirit.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like, okay, get that they're going that way with it. I mean, just the fact that
I totally didn't think of that. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And then with the brother mimicking Anakin's dead mother, as a demon would do something like that to try to corrupt someone. So it's interesting.
I just think it shows how Star Wars is functioning in modern times in the place of ancient mythologies. It's the modern, Western mythology, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
It's using those same. It's just like, if you read a lot of the especially like the Roman Stoics, they'll acknowledge that the mythological stories are important, but they don't believe them. And it's kind of like now, like people don't believe Luke Skywalker or any of that stuff exists. We all know it's fictional, but it's important to us, as it's become such an important part of our sort of cultural experience that it's almost inseparable. Just how like, the Romans like recognized, Greco-Roman mythology is like so intertwined with our culture, we wouldn't even dream of getting rid of it, even though we don't even really believe in these gods anymore. Right. Or we don't believe Hercules was a real person or anything like that. But I feel like Star Wars is filling that function, and it proves that there's a hunger for the transcendent, for meaning, to make sense. Because like, as the world around us increasingly doesn't make sense, there's, a need for some kind of grounding mythology. And if people aren't going to Christianity for that, they're going to go somewhere else, and I feel like, what was it? I heard the other day, like in some country, I think it's Australia, you can actually put on the census Jedi as a religion. Yeah. I think
it is Australia.
Yeah. We'll have to ask our friends from the Catholics of Oz whether that's actually a thing or not, or if that's just a rumor I heard. But yeah, it's like, people are like it's giving meaning to people's lives. And I think it just proves that we as Christians are not telling our story well enough. Because if we were telling our quote unquote myth, and it's, as Lewis called it, the true myth, we're not telling that well enough, people are going to go someplace else. And that's not to put Star Wars and Christianity in any kind of opposition to one another. It's just saying that people are finding in Star Wars something maybe that they're not finding, in the way Christianity is currently being presented to people.
And maybe what they're finding in Star Wars is that little glimmer of truth that's pointing to something bigger. And that's what's making it attractive, but they don't know what it is. So they need something like us that shows them that Catholic connection that is pointing to that bigger truth. There's something bigger out there.
Well, is there anything else in particular you guys wanted to make sure we covered here, or?
There's one other visual reference going all the way back to the beginning with the shape of Mortis looking like two stacked pyramids out in space. And so I looked up, okay, what was the significance of the pyramids, especially in Egypt? And found this, that it's likely because ancient Egyptians viewed the stars as gateways to the netherworld. And so the pyramid shape was intended to help the souls find their way to the afterlife more easily. And thinking of like a pyramid in space, stars are all around. So it's going to point up, it's going to point down, it's, open to all directions. I thought,
so cool.
Wow, that was kind of neat to see that little connection there.
They've actually found in the Great Pyramid of Giza, there are these sort of passageways, tiny little, they're only a few inches across, that go through the entire pyramid. And they're not to let air in or anything like that, but they actually line up with astronomical points, with important constellations. And so they're like, the pyramid is functioning as a device to transport the Pharaoh's soul to the stellar afterlife.
Yeah.
Really cool concept.
Can you imagine the thing? We really gotta aim. It's like, we gotta aim this just right, guys. Or we're gonna die because he's not gonna.
Yeah.
Like, we don't want to mess that up. But that's workplace pressure.
Yeah, workplace pressure of like, guys, we got to move these 20-ton blocks. Let's go.
Yeah. It's like, I feel like what's wrong with him? Oh, he sent Ramses to Orion instead of Pleiades or something. Like, he's just
I heard
awful.
Orion is actually one of the places they're aiming for.
Is that right? Oh, well, that's good. See, I would have done okay. I would have just guessed. It's like,
aren't they supposed to be lined up with the belt or something like that?
I have heard that, and that's why there's two large pyramids and one small one at Giza. Just like there's in Orion's belt, there's two larger stars and a smaller one. Yeah.
Which, by the way, I forgive me if they've already covered this or not, because I'm a very big fan of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. We've mentioned Jimmy twice now on the show, but if they haven't done that one, I'm sure that's on the list already. Some of that
the Great Pyramids,
ancient aliens type stuff.
Oh yeah,
because it's always now. See, in Star Wars, it is always aliens though.
It is always aliens who build all this stuff. Yeah,
we don't have to make our case so much on this show. So, oh my gosh, it all SQPN fans, it all connects, one big happy family. So, do you guys have anything else you want to cover, or are we good for now? You think? Because we can always. I think we'll come back to Mortis at some point.
Oh yeah, in the future,
it's gonna come back.
Yeah, we'll be talking about this for a while. I think as they slowly unravel whatever the heck is going on with this stuff.
Well, we'll be there. Yeah. Well, that's going to be it from us, folks, for tonight. So please feel free, listeners, to keep in touch, as always, with us by emailing any feedback you want over to starwars@sqpn.com. You can visit our Discord community also at sqpn.com/Discord. Over on Facebook, it's facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, and Twitter/X as at SQPN. Previous episodes of this show you can always get over on our main site, sqpn.com/StarWars. And that's always a lot of fun. I recommend people check that out from time to time, because I just did that recently with reminding people that we actually did, in fact, do a Darth Jar Jar deep dive a while back, which was a lot of fun. So we'd also like to take a moment to thank our Secrets of Star Wars patrons, including a special shout out this week to Timothy B., Alexander V., Amanda F., Callie P., and Jason K. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Wars and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. Please tell all your friends to follow the show, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, all those great podcast apps. Pocket Casts is the one I like. They don't pay me to say that, but check them out too. SQPN also is over on YouTube. You can check us out there. Make sure you subscribe and hit that bell for notifications. And we'd appreciate any reviews you can leave us, any ratings on any of those platforms is very helpful and gets the word out about all of our programming here. So last but not least, check out that merch store, sqpn.com/merch. Always new fun stuff over there. So we'll be back in 2 weeks to take a closer look at a series really it's going to, I think, be pretty cool here. The Force and Spirituality. And they're specifically looking next time at light, dark, and balance. Some of those things we brought up tonight, they're going to go deeper. So mark your calendars because you won't want to miss that. So until next time, Kathryn Laffrey, thank you so much for joining me to share in the Secrets of Star Wars.
Thank you. And as Sabine told Ezra, it's art. Everything has meaning.
Absolutely. And Thomas Salerno, thank you so much as well.
Thank you, Mike. May the Force be with you.
And with your spirit. Oh, we always have to do that, right? So thank you for listening to The Secrets of Star Wars on StarQuest.
Here's another show on the StarQuest network you're sure to enjoy. The Secrets of Star Trek. Find it wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/Star Trek.